Jason, before we start, just wanted to give you a heads up. I plan on being here for the entire meeting tonight, but I've been trying to get an appointment scheduled with someone. I may have to step away for a short while, but I plan on being here for the entire meeting.
All right. Thanks for letting us know, Mel. All right. Without further ado, it's 6:31 on my clock, so we will get things going. We will now call to order the Budget and Finance Commission meeting for February 11th, 2021. Marnie, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Woodham?
Here.
Commissioner Wynn?
Oh, I forgot to unmute. I'm here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Solomon?
Here.
Commissioner Samples?
So now I'm off mute. I'm here.
Commissioner Marin?
Oh.
And Chairman Conroy.
Here. All right. Commissioner Marin, would you care to lead us in the salute to the flag, please?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag.
of the United States
of America, and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item D on the agenda, approval of the order of agenda. Would anyone like to change the order of agenda? Seeing none, may I get a motion to approve the order of agenda?
Motion approved.
Second.
Okay, second. All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Marin?
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon?
Aye.
And Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Thank you. All right, moving on to item D, blue folder items. I see we received a blue folder item this evening for item J2. Marnie, are there any other blue folder items not currently included with our agenda?
Nope, just the mid-year budget report that was J2.
Wonderful. All right, seeing no other blue folder items tonight, is there a motion to receive and file the blue folder item?
So moved.
Motion. Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Marin?
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. All right, that brings us to our consent calendar. We've got, we've got 3 items on our consent calendar this evening. These will be approved in one motion. Would any member of the commission like to pull any consent calendar items for discussion at this time? Okay.
I don't know if I want to pull F3, but I just wanted to clarify if there's any changes on the calendar. Any dates changed? I looked at it. I didn't see any changes, but if none dates changed, I think I'm good.
No dates changed. The 2 that are kind of off schedule for your second Thursday are the April meeting, so you can have a joint meeting with the Public Works Commission, and then your May meeting, so that the proposed budget will be out and you will have had a little bit of time to take a look at it.
Okay. Seeing no other comments from the commission, do we have any public comments on the consent calendar? You're muted, Marnie, up here.
No public.
Wonderful.
No e-comments.
Thank you, Doug. All right. Is there a motion then to approve items F1 through F3 of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Seeing a motion in a second, we'll do a roll call vote. Beginning with Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon.
Aye.
And Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Consent calendar items are now received and filed. All right, that brings us to item G. We don't have any excluded consent calendar items, so we will move on to item H, public participation on non-agenda items. This section is intended to provide members of the public with the opportunity to comment on any subject that does not appear on the agenda for action. The section is limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker, including those by Zoom, will be afforded 3 minutes to address the commission. Each speaker will be permitted to speak only once. Written requests, including email comments, if any, will be considered first under this section. Do we have any public participation of non-agenda items tonight?
There are no participants on Zoom.
And
Okay.
there are no e-comments.
Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda are items continued from previous agendas. Commissioners, do you have any items from previous agendas to discuss? Seeing none, we will move on to items for discussion prior to action. Beginning with item J1, presented by our esteemed treasurer, Steve Deals.
Hello, I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. We're here to present to you the Treasurer's Quarterly Report for fiscal year 2021. This is the second quarter, and we'll actually have Nilesh lead virtually all of this. We're available for questions. The one thing I would like to point out, the most notable thing, is that the size of our portfolio declined to 2014 levels. And we have been unable to buy a single security for nearly a year now through this entire COVID situation, although which will not show up on this report this month, we finally did. So that's good news. So maybe things are on the upswing, but I would like you to take note of the size of the portfolio. And take it away, Nilesh.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nilesh Mehta, Chief Deputy City Treasurer. I hope everyone is able to view the screen share that I am sharing right now. It's the PowerPoint presentation, which in your agenda packet begins on page 94. Included with our presentation is the Treasurer's Portfolio Summary, which is on the quarterly admin report, which begins on page 18 of your agenda packet. We have investment reporting guidelines included, and then the investment report by FHN Main Street Financial Advisors, and that begins on page 29 of your agenda packet. That includes the portfolio summary, investment policy compliance, investment activity report, as well as the economic and market update. We will be going over some of these throughout this presentation today. Within the PowerPoint presentation is the investment reporting objectives and guidelines, policy compliance, quarterly performance, cash flow analysis, fiscal impact for the quarter, month-end portfolio book yield, maturity distribution, sector allocation, historical book value, as well as trading activity, which Steve alluded to just a minute ago. Key investment objectives for municipal investing, as you all may have seen: safety, liquidity, and yield. And we try to focus on those in that order: safety, protect principal, liquidity, provide necessary liquidity to cover ongoing and unexpected cash needs, and yield, which is the final consideration, which is to maximize earnings, recognizing safety and liquidity. And here's a continuation of our guidelines. Always remember that it's the community's money and not ours, so we have to act accordingly in a responsible stewardship capacity.
We don't need to read all these.
Okay.
We'll just, I mean, nobody is new here, right? That hasn't seen this report yet?
I believe so, yes. Everyone
Okay.
has seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, just go through these slides. If anybody has any questions, they've seen all this.
Okay. All right.
Give it a moment. Questions to ask. This is a guideline for you and for the board. And you may continue.
Here's a summary of our investment policy compliance. The column on the right shows that we are in compliance with our policy. And then this slide here goes over our quarterly performance for the second quarter of fiscal year 2021. We have just over 10 million in cash, 15 million in LAIF, federal agencies, 34.5 million, corporate medium-term notes, just about 21 million, CDs, 1.7 million, and treasuries, 4 million. Total investment portfolio, 76 million. Weighted average maturity, 1.68. The rate of return on the portfolio, 2.12%. LAIF yield for the quarter was 0.54%. Yield on the benchmark, 1.63%. And the interest earned year to date, 815,000. Of that, we contribute just about 50% into the general fund. So that comes out to just under 400,000. Here's a comparison for the 1920 performance. So a notable thing here is the LAIF yield just about a year ago was 2.04%. So it's a significant change in the yield in our LAIF funds. And then this is the fiscal year performance for 18-19.
So we give you those so you can see them, you know, the trends over the years. And I think the admin report has 5 years in it.
Correct. And then here's a snapshot of our cash flow analysis. Notable events that have occurred in the last 6 months. In July, we have a PERS prepayment for the entire year of 13 million. And in December, we receive our semi-annual property tax deposit. This year was just about 15.5 million. And so here's a cash flow analysis for the entire fiscal year in the past, fiscal year 1920. Of course, things have changed for this year, but this gives us an idea about future cash flow trends.
Can you go back 2 slides, please?
Sure, 2 slides, sure.
So this slide, the PERS prepayment, so it's worth noting that there's a reason we prepay that. We could invest that money and earn 2%, but by prepaying, and I don't actually know the savings number, and I'm sure Marnie does, but we save a significant amount more than we would get by investing this. Nilesh, do you know the number, the percentage savings we're getting by prepaying?
I think it's 3.5%.
Okay, so 3.5%. So we're getting an extra 1.5% by prepaying.
That's a guaranteed return.
Correct. That is correct.
Here's a slide on the fiscal impact for the quarter. Interest earned year to date, 815,000. And of course, we contribute about half of that into the general fund, just under 400,000. And then here's a snapshot of the month-end portfolio book yield for the entire 2020. It shows the changes that have occurred by month. And we're currently just about 2%. Maturity distribution. This chart shows that we have about 40% of our portfolio in maturities, in investments that are maturing within the year, 0 to 1 year. So here's a chart on our sector allocation. We have 45% in agencies, 5% in treasuries, 2.3% in CDs. LAIF, there's about 20% in LAIF, and corporate notes, 27%. And this chart goes over the historical book value going all the way back to September 2009. And as Steve mentioned, we are around the time that we were back in 2014. As you can see on this fiscal year 2021, December, and then if you go back and you'll see fiscal year 2014, that's around the time that we had the same kind of balances.
So that's the point. Can you go back to the graphic, please? So this is a function of not being able to invest for a year. And as the city's revenues are falling and expenses are increasing, it definitely affects the size of the portfolio. So,
Steve, a question on that. We're about 10 million under where we were at the same time last year. Is that that reduction, is that felt pretty much across all owners of the portfolio, or some more than others?
it's equally distributed across all aspects of the portfolio. Yes.
Steve, can you give us a little bit more of a framework around, you've said a couple times, we cannot invest. Can you describe that a little bit more?
We don't have the cash. So if we have surplus cash, we can buy instruments. If we don't, we can't. So we haven't had surplus cash to purchase anything for a year.
Okay, so we're spending faster than we're collecting revenue, and that's where the challenge is.
Well, we're at the same rate.
Okay.
So we're spending at the same rate where the earnings are coming in. So we haven't had surplus cash.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Excuse me for a moment. I have to turn my camera off. I have to get my situation fixed here. But carry on.
Steve or Nilesh, with items coming to maturity and our reduced cash flexibility, these items are they getting deposited into cash, into LAIF? Do we have to worry about, or what's the plan if we need to rebalance based on items coming up to maturity and not getting repurchased, or just going into cash or into LAIF?
So the funds, as soon as they are redeemed, they go into our cash balances. And then, of course, if we don't have immediate needs for those funds, then we do transfer those funds into LAIF for a slightly higher return, as well as maintain that liquidity, because we can transfer the money as needed.
Yeah. LAIF is always the first place the money goes, and when then we get a big balance in LAIF, then we can invest if we know we don't have a big purchase coming up.
Got it. So that's the plan for rebalancing. If we find that our maturity rates are escalating or reducing outside of our guidelines, then we able to use the funds within LAIF to perhaps get us back into guideline by purchasing something from a 0 to 1 year or 0 to 2 year.
Yeah, that's literally what we just did.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you for explaining that.
I mean, the good news is, I mean, we can share something that's not in this report, but we did finally buy some instruments. But it was crazy. I've never, in my time on the council and as treasurer, have been through such a long period of no investments. But anyhow, but yeah, it goes into the money always goes into LAIF first if we've got a big balance in the general fund, and then then from LAIF was spend it down and refill the general fund as needed. But then if we can look at our cash flows, and Nilesh has done a nice job of presenting cash flows, that's new to the report. We'll know if we've got enough surplus money to invest for at least some period of time.
So I see the redemptions there. Did we sell anything before maturity? Or I know we usually don't, but just wondering, we have on rare occasion in the past.
We have on rare occasions, not of late. I don't think that's reflected in this chart, no.
Correct. Yeah. These are redemptions when the maturities were due. But as Steve mentioned, you'll see on this chart, the last time we made a purchase was February of 2020. So it's been quite a while, and it's reflective here.
Marnie, do we have an idea of what our PERS payment's going to be? I know you have an idea, but last year was 13 million. Are we at the 15 million for what our PERS payment would be coming up this July?
Approximately, yeah.
15 million? Okay, thank you.
And this concludes our report. So if you guys have any questions.
One interesting, quick question. When our audit is performed for the overall city finances, do they take a look at our investment portfolio and verify that the assets that we think are there are actually there?
Yeah, that's an easy check because all I have to do is look at our Wells Fargo account.
And explain that. How does Wells enter into
Our holding company? Is it? Yeah. So we have a holding agency. So they furnish the proof that we actually hold what we say we're holding.
So Wells in effect serves as a custodian. They
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
Steve, if we continue, say, for the rest of the calendar year to not have any excess cash, to buy additional instruments or just to fund the requirements of the city, what are your thoughts on how will that affect the city? If we continue on the current path we're on.
Nilesh, can you go back to the slide that shows the age of the maturities? Right here. So you can, right there. So you can see that most of our investments are in the 0 to 1 year range. And so as these mature, we've got the cash. If for some reason we were, as Mel was saying, we're spending faster than we had rent money coming in, there would be a request from the city to the treasurer's office to redeem prematurely some instruments in order to cover cash flow needs. But that's what you'd be getting into if the situation didn't change. If we get to a point where we have to liquidate the portfolio literally to pay off everything and we're out of cash, then the city's in big trouble. But, like I said, we this month just purchased some. And so I think hopefully we bottomed out. But that's what would happen. But this is why we've got the portfolio spread like we do in this chart.
You're currently on mute.
Oh,
thank you. No. Okay, that's helpful. I'm guessing that this reduction in revenues is almost entirely COVID related. Other than COVID, is there anything that, if hopefully we get through this whole thing sooner rather than later, and if, I guess other than COVID, is there anything that's pulling our revenues down that we still need to deal with?
Yes, it's our really inability to have economic development. I mean, the waterfront's tied up. There's so much political debate. There's lawsuits. So we've got our cities around us that have been able to invest and there's what's called leakage. So residents are going outside the area and visitors are not coming in. The biggest revenue stream that's been noticeably hit by COVID is obviously the transient occupancy tax. That's very apparent. Sales tax actually doesn't look too bad, believe it or not. Property tax is up. But the visitor serving, TOTs, and then sales taxes in certain areas of the city are suffering. But that's why economic development is a pretty big deal.
Thank you. All right.
We heard from Larry Cosmon in our last meeting, and Dan Masiello was presenting and described us as having a AA+ rating, financial rating for the city. It doesn't seem like that's endangered or looking to erode at all, or do you see a horizon or possibility where even that might be affected by current trends?
I think that's like a credit rating. And so we've been able to pay all our bills, so we're good. But if it gets to the point where we can't, then yeah, that would affect our credit rating. And I don't think that's a function of our economic development. The rating itself is not a function of our economic development. It's a credit rating.
I was thinking more along the lines of if we have an eroding investment portfolio that could, in the short term or longer term, look to be problematic, it might affect our credit rating. That's what I was asking in that regard.
Oh,
Yeah, so I spoke to Torrance not too long ago, who just issued bonds. And just because of revenues being down so much because of the pandemic, the credit rating for their most recent bond issue was down from their historic levels. Not greatly. I mean, they were still able to sell and all that kind of stuff, but it was down in these times.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a function of revenues, not the portfolio itself. It's really the city's ability to meet its objectives and its especially its debt payments.
Let me ask you a question about there's a $10 million reduction in the investment portfolio. Half of that is general fund. Marty, does that mean that we've the budget that was finally put in place was a balanced budget at about $10 million less than it had been the prior year? Does this mean that there's been a $5 million slippage in budget for the first 6 months? We've had to dip into reserves, in effect, dip into reserves for $5 million.
We'll see this when we get to the mid-year budget report. Yeah, things are not coming in as projected. We, at the time of the budget adoption, which of course that estimation process started clear back in March, how long this thing has gone on, our revenues are not meeting expectations.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have any further questions or comments related to J1 from the commissioners for Stephen and Nilesh? Okay. Seeing none, are there any public comments?
No e-comments.
Marnie? I can't hear you.
No public on Zoom.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Seeing no comments, additional comments or questions, then I will ask for a motion to receive and file item J1.
So move.
Second.
All right. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
Okay, chair votes aye as well. Item J1 is now received and filed, and I want to thank Treasurer Deals and Nilesh for their presentation.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Next item for discussion, private action is J2, discussion and possible action regarding the mid-year budget report. Go ahead and take it, Marnie.
Okay, I'm going to also attempt to share my screen with the presentation. So you can see that, can you?
Yes.
Okay, good. So here we are at mid-year, looking at half of the fiscal year complete. We have taken a look at revenues and expenditures at this halfway point. And as we hinted at, there are severe pandemic-related financial challenges, which is giving us a projected $1.4 million general fund shortfall beyond that which we quote unquote fixed with the budget adoption. So general fund revenues are down 2.8 million from what had been estimated when the budget was adopted. The adopted revenues were at 88.7 million, and now we are projecting them to be at 85.9 million. That is made up of good news, slightly in the area of taxes. Property taxes are up from what we had estimated at about 700,000. 110,000 more in sales tax. But of course, that is higher than our low estimates, not back to anywhere near what they were. Utility users tax, that one is up about 100,000. And TOT, at the budget adoption, we had estimated that they were going to come in a whole lot lower. Overall, throughout the fiscal year, about 50% lower than they had been in recent years. And we're having to take that projection down by about $150,000 more. Property transfer tax is, we're keeping that estimate the same. The fall had really good property sales. So as we mentioned at the first quarter budget update, time will tell whether that's a trend or what usually occurs in the summer just happened a little bit later in the fall. But by next quarter, we should have a better picture of that. And then the remaining taxes are up about $170,000. So here's a new picture for us, and it is all COVID related. Our rents and percentages, where we rent out facilities. For example, performances and just rentals of the facility, the Performing Arts Center, the aviation gym isn't having anybody use it. Veterans Park that Spectrum Catering does, that's been empty. And then on top of that, our recreation user pay programs are not operating. So we are getting no revenues from that. So
Marnie, do we get any rent from the farmers markets that they have at Veterans Park or down in the village?
No.
We just volunteer the space at Veterans Park for them to run the farmers market?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
We do get a little bit of revenue off from the operations, but not specifically rent. Rents and percentages is down 1.8 million, and recreation user pay programs and activities is another 1.4 million. So between the two, we're losing about $3.2 million this year.
Marnie,
that as soon as we can come back and open up and large gatherings can happen, these should pop right back up. But for now, it's hurting our budget really badly.
Marnie, where would things like parking revenues from either meters or the harbor parking lots fall into these categories?
So they are a separate line item, and they are holding their own. We're not seeing decreases there. And another area of revenue is overhead. Not much change in overhead with our latest internal service fund and overhead update, which we always complete for the mid-year review. And you can see the details of that in budget response report number 1. And then the rest of general fund revenue in total is down about 500,000. So to take care of this, we have appropriations adjustments and decision packages. The appropriation adjustments include the ISF and overhead annual update. And then on that schedule, we are also including departmental maintenance and operations savings. So we asked the departments as they were doing their mid-year review to take a look and see what kind of savings they might have. Our hope at the time that we asked was it would just give us a better picture of where we would end up at year end. But in fact, as we finalized and got everybody's feedback, we actually are reducing the budget by these savings. In addition to those adjustments, there are 8 recommended decision packages, not all general fund. One of the schedules attached to the admin report is a fund balance summary. And we have the decision packages line itemed separately on there so you can see how each fund is impacted by them. But with those decision packages, we end up with general fund net savings. And in here, in addition to the departmental maintenance and operations savings, are personnel savings too. In a same thing, we are actually having to reduce the budget by their projected savings. That still leaves us with a $1.4 million shortfall that we started the presentation with, and that we are transferring from the Calpers reserve fund to bring the general fund into balance. We actually were expecting right in that neighborhood, $1 to $2 million to be transferred at fiscal 1920 year end, but we weren't hit as badly as we thought we were going to be in 1920. It's kind of been delayed, and our impact is being felt now in 2021. So that we were going to transfer in 1920, we're now transferring in 2021.
Marnie, quick question.
Yes.
You said at the beginning that there was a $1.4 million revenue shortfall. Then the numbers that showed on that first slide, the $2.8 million decrease. Is the 1.4 simply the first 2 quarters of the 2.8 million? Is half of that? How do we get, those are two different numbers that look like the same thing.
So the revenues at the 2.8 come into play, but then also these that we've just described, the savings from departments in both maintenance and operations and personnel, and these decision packages net us to the 1.4. So it's made up of revenue and expenditure. So to show where we end up, we are looking, all the actions that have been taken to date give us a ending fund balance of almost 600,000. But from that, we lose $2.8 million in revenue. And with our ISF update and our M&O savings, we lose another almost 300,000. The decision packages have been done to help the situation. So this includes the $1.4 million transfer from Calpers Reserve Fund. So that helps by $2.5 million and leaves us with an estimated fund balance of 0.
Marnie, I have a couple of questions, please, if I
Sure.
may. I wish I would like to have dug in a little bit more. I understand the difficulties in getting these reports out and getting them to us. I didn't have the time to really dig down deep into it, just kind of a surface dig. Are we saving on operational expenses for, say, the Performing Arts Center or employee labor for a lot of activities? We would deploy resources, payroll to staffing some of these events, and some of the other things that you mentioned where we're finding that we lost money. Is that a net of operational costs or is that a gross of operational costs?
So we have, which line is it? So back to the savings that we are reducing the budget for, those would include such things as the cost to operate the Performing Arts Center. You've got some fixed costs and full-time employees that we're still paying even though we're not bringing in any revenue, but a lot of the part-time and contracted help for individual performances, those we have savings from. So that would be reflected in these savings that we're reducing the budgets by. Same with the recreation programs. We don't need so many instructors for the programs. They are doing some online activities. So we do have some staff working some part-time staff and that operates these programs, but a lot of that comes into these savings that we're taking advantage of. It's just that they do not rise to the level of the revenue loss.
So that might be part of the M&O savings that you were describing
Yes.
earlier?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Last, I think it was in January, we had an unallocated general fund, an amount to the unallocated general fund that was paid out as part of an agreement with some of the employee unions that we did in January. Is that right?
Are you referring to new MOUs?
Yeah, the new MOUs that were concluded in January.
Right.
So some of those bonuses and some of those other adjustments, were those paid out of an unallocated general fund balance that was already there or from some other fund?
Yes. So that is basically, we have the current estimated ending fund balance that is already taken into account. Those are appropriations that are made before this $600,000.
Okay, so that $600,000 current fund balance is net of that
Yes.
obligation?
Yes.
Okay. And with us reducing, we're taking some money out of, where was it? In the decision package, we're transferring from the Calpers Reserve Fund, which we do at times like this to help us come into balance. And then can you elaborate a little bit more on the Beach Cities transit vehicles? Was it that these, decision package 7, was that these vehicles are at the end of their useful life or that we're extending it? I just wanted to clarify that.
End of its useful life, at least it will be by the time we have the new vehicles in. So the majority was already appropriated, and this is out of transit funds, not out of the general fund. But as they've gotten further down the road, realized they need a bit more to make the full purchases.
So was this is not out of the vehicle replacement fund, it's out of a different transit fund?
It is. That, I believe that is the exception, is transit vehicles are not in the vehicle replacement fund. They are handled outside of that process.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. So I think that's probably all we have on mid-year.
All right. All right, Marnie, if that concludes your report, do we have any other questions or comments from the commission? Do we have any public comments? Jerry, were you going to say something? Did I cut you off?
I wanted to follow up on that question I asked Marnie a moment ago. I'm still not, the total picture still puzzles me. We've got a $2.8 million revenue shortfall in the general fund, but we've pulled down $5 million from our investment portfolio and $1.4 million from the Calpers Reserve Fund. So we've pulled assets down totaling $6.4 million, it appears. Is that correct? And in response to and that's year to date, and we've got a $2.8 million revenue shortfall expected for the full year. So my question is, where has that $6.4 million from assets gone?
So here we're really looking at fund balance, whereas the treasurer is looking at just cash. So I don't think the two necessarily are the same thing.
Well, let's look just at cash. I mean, where has the $6.4 million of cash gone? That's actual cash. That's not a fund balance.
And he's looking for, from what period of time?
Well, from the same period last year, yeah, maybe that's the problem. I should be looking at the beginning of the fiscal year rather than, maybe I'm looking at the wrong balance. I was taking the 5 million drawdown in general fund balance in the investment portfolio, but that's from December of last year to December of this year. So maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing.
That's, that's a lot of timing too, for example. So when city treasurer talks about general portfolio, that is not only general fund.
I know, it's a $10 million total difference, so, and the general fund owns half of that, so that's how I was getting it at 5 million.
Yeah, and that's an estimate based on prior years. So
yeah. Okay, scratch that question. I think I understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, go ahead.
Haven't really. I don't know if if we're looking to have us weigh in and make suggestions or recommendations about the decision packages or not. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, not having a lot of time to dig into it. So I think that there's a lot there. There's a lot of good information, but I would want to dig into it a little bit deeper before joining and making a suggestion to approve or not approve any of the decision packages.
yeah, you certainly have the opportunity to weigh in, but it's not required either.
Marnie, you mentioned that the plan for the budget was to pull approximately 1.4 million from the Calpers Reserve Fund. Is that correct?
Yes, the 1.4 is being shortfall is being filled
And
with the transfer.
But did you also say that was a planned shortfall? We originally had planned to, or did we miss our target by 1.4 net of our reductions in expenses?
Well, of course, these, the revenue estimates, we were projecting on an assumption that we weren't going to still be in the same situation here at mid-year. So the revenue projections have come down. What I was talking about is 1920. We really had expected that we would need to use the Calpers Reserve Fund to fill holes at that time, but revenues hadn't fallen as greatly as we had thought they might. But now they have.
Okay, so it's more just a timing of when we were going to tap into the Calpers Reserve Fund.
It is, yeah.
Okay, and what's our methodology for building that fund up again? I guess when we have surpluses.
Typically, we do that at year end. As we were writing that decision package, we typically put in there about it being paid back. I was not confident enough that we would be able to pay that back at least this fiscal year. If revenues do continue all fiscal year to be way down, we're not going to be able to do that. We will look to do that as revenues come back. But I think it's going to be a longer period of time that the general fund holds on to that money than typical.
Even
but
with
of course, this time is not typical.
Right, and no one has a perfect crystal ball, but
No.
like the expectations are that it'll be a little while before revenues come back.
Yes.
We'll probably have a little more certainty that expenses are going to continue to increase year over year. So that makes it all that much harder to replenish the Calpers Reserve Fund, right?
Exactly, it sure does. Not impossible, but yes, more difficult.
Yeah, all the more reason for us to be looking for alternative methods of funding our Calpers obligations.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Marnie. Anything else, commissioners?
Well, Commissioner Woodham caused me to go back and look at some of the old charts. And I think I may have confused myself more. But for the sake of discussion, if I look at chart 108 from the earlier presentation, it basically says that our typical book yield interest on our portfolio is around 2% for the last year. So that would say that we've got a positive yield. But when I look down at historical book value of the general fund, it looks like since the beginning of this fiscal year, we've gone, I don't have exact numbers in this chart, but it looks like we started at about $85 million and now we're at 70. So that's a $15 million drawdown this fiscal year. And I'm trying to figure out how that reconciles with, I think, what was Commissioner Woodham's question about it sounds like we're spending money much faster than we're collecting revenue. I don't know, Commissioner Woodham, am I thinking about the same things you are?
You are. The mistake I was making is I was comparing second quarter of fiscal 21 with the second quarter of fiscal 20 when I should have been comparing it to the fourth quarter of fiscal 20. So whatever that balance was on June 30th, comparing that to December 31st, that's the true amount that the general fund has had its assets decreased. I was calculating that at about 5 million. I'm not sure what it is, and I don't have that the report pulled up on the screen now. But that was what I was getting at. If we pull down, if the delta in the assets for the general fund are in the range of 4 to 5 million, and we're transferring 1.4 million from Calpers, then that's the issue I was looking at. But I think my numbers are incorrect. I don't know if that 5 million is correct.
And a lot of the cash balance is timing. For example, the city treasurer always brings up our Calpers payment in July. So, it's budgeted as if it were going to be spread over the fiscal year, but no, it hits right at the very beginning. The first half of the year is typically our lowest in cash with that Calpers payment. And then we don't get our first large property tax payment until like December 20th. So first half of the year is rough on cash. And then we kind of build that back up, in normal years. Over the second half of the fiscal year.
Well, this chart that I'm looking at, this is chart 111 in Mr. Deal's package. And it's hard to tell exact numbers, but it looks like roughly from the September report to now, the drawdown has been about $8 million. And that's after the Calpers payment, which we always recognize that huge drop in the first quarter of the fiscal year. But that's another $8 million after that, and it seems like it's much worse than in prior years when. And like I said, I'm eyeballing the chart, so I may not have it exactly right, but it causes me some concern.
And two, playing into the timing is, and I don't know the cycle on it, our capital improvement projects. So those are some awfully big payments that, aren't necessarily paid evenly over the fiscal year. So
Right.
Could come into play as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
All right. Anything else for Marnie on this item?
I had a quick question.
Yes,
Thank you,
Commissioner Johnson.
Mr. Chair. Marty, I don't want to oversimplify this, but over the years, we've seen a lot of decision packages, and we've seen mid-year review decision packages, and a lot that have a lot more volume numerically of individual decision items. And there always seems to have been ways to find, we're going to take this budget aspect and not spend this, or we're going to remove some open positions and not fill them. And so given our pension outlook, is it oversimplifying it to say that we had exhausted other places to close this budget gap before going to the Calpers reserve?
Well, we did use some others, like I mentioned, with the projected savings, both in M&O and personnel vacancies, before coming to the number to transfer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of people are in agreement. I don't expect our hotels to be filling up before the end of this fiscal year. It's just not going to happen.
No, that's why we took that revenue estimate down yet again. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. I'll ask again for any public comments or questions regarding this item.
No public on Zoom.
No e-comments.
Thank you. Seeing nothing else from the commission, I'll ask for a motion to receive and file item J2.
So moved.
Second.
All right. We will do a roll call vote, beginning with Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon.
No.
Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Item J2 is now received and filed. All right. Moving on to item J3, discussion and possible action regarding the implementation of internal control measures. Marnie, take it.
Sure. So in your packet, you have our schedule about implementing internal control items. We are doing our best to make some progress without Moss Adams' normal, I guess you could call it, our ongoing assistance. They are assisting us with a couple of policies because that funding wasn't totally used in the previous fiscal year. With those policies, we have sent edits to Moss Adams on our purchasing card or CalCard policy, and waiting to hear back from them on our edits, whether they feel they're acceptable or not. The other policy, and I think we had mentioned this last quarter, is the Internal Service Fund policy. So at a first glance, they are recommending some controls that we don't feel could be implemented with the information that we have available to us. So we have now specified the concerns we have implementing those controls, and we've had to reschedule a couple times, but we do have a meeting rescheduled again for a couple weeks from now to go over those concerns and see if they can't provide us with some alternate controls that we would be able to implement. The other item that we've made some progress on is the ordinance creating the Financial Services Department. So the reviews have been going much slower than I ever anticipated. We have sent it to the city attorney in conjunction with others looking at the ordinance, so they can happen at the same time, and we don't continue to wait for the reviews. So city attorney will let us know if the way it is written currently conflicts with the city charter or not. And if in fact it does, we have asked them to provide some suggestions on how we could still go ahead with the ordinance and yet make it in compliance with the charter. So those are the items. A lot of the others are training that will occur once the policies are complete. And I can answer any questions you have.
Quick question. I'm just curious, what ideas are up for implementation or being considered that you would think would be inconsistent with the city charter? Or is that just something that is just always done as a matter of course when implementing any control measures?
It is the way I have drafted it. It lists out duties and then says that this would be done by financial services with oversight from the city clerk or the city treasurer, depending on the applicable duty. And I've had a little bit of feedback that maybe oversight isn't quite enough to allow the city clerk and city treasurer to fulfill their charter duties. So we're going to get a city attorney opinion on that.
Arnie, two questions, please. One on the issue you were just talking about. Changing or coming forward with an ordinance to change the charter seems
Ordinance
to blur
change
the line
the
here.
municipal code.
Municipal code. It involves getting the city council involved as well, as it's a policy matter. I don't remember this coming in front of them as a discussion item at any time. So prior to this, is it going to come to them prior to certainly hasn't come before the review. Would it come before the city attorney looks at it or after?
After. There's no need to have them adopt an ordinance that conflicts. So we want to take care of all of that before presenting it to the city council. And
taking it as I'm sorry.
Yeah, our goal on this is to get it to the city council. That's our end goal. We don't have control beyond that as far as what decision the city council makes, but it's within our work plan to bring it to them.
Well, I like the idea of assuming the sale, to take it to them that this is something that's preordained that is going to be done. So hopefully they'll take the sales assumption. The second thing, if I may, is one of the internal control priorities previously listed with Moss Adams was the fraud, waste, and abuse program training. Where maybe I'm missing it or I'm not seeing it listed here with these other items. Is that something that was already implemented and no need, or something that got sidelined as one of the top priorities?
Yeah, these items are one that we can do without Moss Adams assistance. If you'll recall, during the budget adoption, our funding of work with Moss Adams was undone for the fiscal year. And the way they were suggesting the fraud, waste, and abuse program to operate was really just about 100% them. So we have to wait till that contract's back in place before we can do anything on it.
Okay, thank you.
Marnia, I just have one question. On item 3 in the implementation status, it's talking about the purchasing card program. And what I'm not clear on is, and maybe it's just because I don't have access to the purchasing card manual, but this talks about updating responsibilities and activities. Within the P-card manual, are there guidelines for what can be purchased under what circumstances and signature authorities and things like that?
Yeah, that's tolling. It's really two places. Just the program itself has controls like that in it, but then the policy as well will have that. Not to the specific of this person's limits are here, but these are the default limits. This is how you get it changed. All that will be in the policy.
And then how purchases are reviewed. So we don't have to worry about things getting reclaim charges being put on P cards that realistically should be a vended contract and purchase order.
There's dollar limits and type of purchase limits.
Right.
You aren't going to prevent these cards from being used for things you don't want them used for, but we can certainly put in as many controls as possible that certainly limit.
Well, first of all, I believe that the reason for the P-card program is in order to expedite emergency purchases and those things that continue to make the city run. I'm just thinking about things where it becomes convenient to simply purchase things, sometimes high value items on a recurring contract under a P card rather than going through the normal purchasing process. And you can't prevent it, but how does it get caught and reviewed? That's the whole concept of internal controls. So
and that's
what I'm curious about.
Yeah, so currently just the program itself has the dollar limits that would prevent it from, to a certain extent, up to that dollar limit. You have both an individual purchase limit, and then you also have, is it monthly? I can't remember, but you have an additional dollar limit. So that's okay. Built into the program. But yes, the review of it and all that is going to be described in the policy.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So I think what you're asking, Commissioner, and it's not clear, 100% clear to me, is before our P cards at my company, before our P cards get paid, there's a review of the statement, and we call it a reconciliation process. So like you said, you can't prevent, and our P cards actually have filters that don't allow people to purchase certain types of things. So for example, Costco or 7-Eleven, you couldn't use it there. But is there an after the fact review and quick to look at the statements and see if there are purchases on there that we didn't want?
That's kind of what I was
and then those are spelled out in the policy. Okay. They exist just in our accounts payable process, but specifically written for the purchasing cards in this policy.
Have there been any necessity during the pandemic to change our procurement processes for the city? Because of more emergency purchases, protective equipment or anything, or because people aren't in the office, it's been more difficult, or we use the same controls and procedures?
Same controls.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Quick question on item 5, as it relates to grant training for personnel involved in grants administration. I guess as a question for Doug, I believe this is an area he is oversees. I'm just curious, how that became an item. Does it relate to training that for Doug, or is there somebody that works under Doug or with Doug? And what was the training we had in place? Go on.
This is actually a recommendation by Moss Adams. So here in the city, the departments go out and get their own grants. They have the contacts and all of that to do so. Doug coordinates that. He reviews their reporting and all that coordination kind of work with the grants. And so once we can get with people again, we will train those who work with the grants in the individual departments.
So is the recommendation that we do training that we weren't doing before?
Right.
Okay, so there's representatives from departments that work with Doug on the grants, but in Moss Adams' opinion, they hadn't been provided adequate training to do so.
Right.
Okay.
We have a policy and we hand it to them, but there's no, when we highlight certain items, but just on an individual basis, no formal
training.
Yeah.
So if I'm reading this report right, are we committing to going with Moss Adams' recommendation and having a more formal process, and we're going to accomplish that by June 30th? Is that correctly?
And that will possibly be delayed, just depending on closures.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up on that, realizing that probably the most difficult part of grants is the ongoing reporting that you have to do related to the expenses. Is there any, I guess, other than the 1 or 2 people in a particular department that are responsible for administering a particular grant, is there any higher level oversight and I hate to call it supervision, but basically just verification that we're staying on track and we're not missing any of those deadlines? Or is it just left to 1 or 2 people in each department?
So as far as the departments go, usually it's a staff level person who of course has, at least a department head, maybe other supervisors, but in addition to that, Doug does a lot of that.
Okay. So I guess I hate to put you on the spot on this one. Have we recently missed any of those deadlines? Have we lost any of the grant funding on projects because of missed deadlines or anything?
We have not. Yep. Next month we plan to bring you our single audit report with no findings, and so far so good.
That's a good news thing.
Yes.
Let's not have a report on something that we don't need to have a report on. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anything else from Marnie on this item? Okay. Do we have any public comments?
None from Zoom.
No e-comments.
All right. Thank you. All right. Then can we get a motion to receive and file item J3, please?
So moved.
In a second. All right, we'll do a roll call vote, beginning with Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Marin,
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples,
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Item J3 is now received and filed. Moving on to our final item for discussion prior to action, item J4, discussion of possible action regarding Calpers and workers' compensation subcommittee. All right, if I may, I'll just start by saying on behalf of the subcommittee that we communicated this period via email, and per the commission's directive, we drafted a letter to City Council requesting that they view the Cosmont presentation about refinancing Calpers UAL unfunded accrued liabilities with bonds. In their February 9th meeting, City Council agreed to invite Cosmont back and give them, I believe, a similar presentation to what we received. I know, Eugene, you even participated in that. Would you like to add anything else?
The staff brought to the City Council the Cosmont presentation, and then in a forward-thinking way, also, if the council wishes, a contract that could allow Cosmont or another vendor go forward with the analysis of obtaining those bonds and bringing them to an underwriter. So next City Council meeting, the City Council will be viewing the Cosmont presentation that we saw and give direction to staff and to possibly Cosmont or another vendor to move forward or not.
I will say that in viewing the meeting, I hope there wasn't a misunderstanding that our sense of urgency was more so related to capturing rates while they're low, which certainly is a consideration, but I don't think anyone, although nobody knows where rates are going, there isn't any large indicators that they're going to be going up greatly anytime soon. But they did correctly ascertain the urgency of getting this going sooner rather than later, if we're going to have any opportunity to make use of it for this year's Calpers prepayment mid-year. Jerry, is there anything else on that subject you'd like to touch on or describe to the commission?
No, I don't think so. They're going to hear a presentation from Cosmont. I take it next Tuesday night, right, Marnie? So, and in the meantime, they may as well review our tape from the last meeting if they have time. That would be worthwhile to come into that meeting with Cosmont next week with armed with some knowledge of what we discussed with them a month ago.
Yeah, and that was the recommendation we made in our letter to council, was to view the presentation as we saw it, and by extension our discussion and questions with them. So
Councilman Horvath brought that up as well and suggested that action as well.
Okay, so I want to thank the commission as a body for moving forward on that recommendation to council, and thank my subcommittee members for helping the three of us put our heads together and come up with a letter, which you guys all got a copy of to submit to council. So thank you. Commissioners, or Marnie, for that matter, do you have any questions or comments about the actions we took within the last month? Or
So, Mr. Chair, I do have a question, and I think Commissioner Solomon kind of touched on it using the words "this vendor" or "another vendor." In my experience, one would see a presentation similar to that from a number of vendors before being so enthusiastic about making a recommendation or charting a course of action. Is this the premier vendor in this realm? I mean, I'm not familiar with this type of public bond. And what is the process for finding out? I mean, I'll draw an example. When it's time to select an auditor, we have 5 audit firms come in and talk to us, and we hear what they have to say. And in this instance, and as you know, and I have gone back and listened to some of that, I was not really able to see what they were doing at first, and all that connectivity issue that has been going on for a number of months. So just listening to it, the level of enthusiasm seemed to be, oh yes, well, let's do this. And maybe that's the right answer, but what's the answer as far as why this vendor and why this extreme enthusiasm before hearing from other parties?
Well, I think that's a very fair criticism.
It's not a criticism.
Okay, a very fair,
Valid comment.
valid comment. There you go.
Observation.
I'll just briefly speak on my own behalf, and then let the other subcommittees or the other commission members weigh in. I think, and it could have been my mistake as well. The feeling, the understanding I got based on their presentation and the discussion that the gentleman had with us at the time is that we had been doing work with this firm previously. And that combined with the fact that they had done similar bond issuances with local municipalities recently, to me made it think like that they weren't somebody out of the blue, but somebody the city and the staff was familiar with working with, and maybe we had a level of trust or history with them where it maybe would make sense to hear what they had to say. But I totally agree with you, Commissioner Johnson. We're talking about quite a big commitment, a lot of money up front to make it happen, and potential, as you know, 50 to upwards of near $100 million over the whole life of the bond. So it's a lot of money, and it does take consideration. If the sense of the letter was overly enthusiastic, at least in my opinion, it wasn't meant to be. It was more in our advisory role to just let them know, like, hey guys, this isn't something that we should put off for months and months or till the next fiscal year. We do have the opportunity, not that we have to take advantage of it, but if in the council's wisdom, they feel like, hey, we have the opportunity to save a lot of money this year if we're able to come up with to do this bond issuance before we do our prepayment on Calpers, but that can only be done by moving things quickly, in a quicker fashion. But that was always, in my mind, a decision for them to make, not that we were saying this is our only option. And I agree. We should hear from some competing firms and see what they
Yeah, and just to further that thought, we've got a couple of major hires to make that City Council needs to be involved in some way. We need an investment banker to issue these bonds, and I don't know that we want to take Cosmont's recommendation of who that investment banker should be. We really need to look at that. We need to select bond counsel, and again, they will have recommendations, but that process that can take some thought. So I think where we come back to is that the reason to hurry up is to include the payment at the beginning of July in that financing. And when you look at the decisions that have yet to be made and that need to be made, we may be faced with the reality that we can't do it that quickly. It still is important to get started, and I have no problem with hurrying up that presentation to City Council next week because we need to get this ball rolling. But then to understand who we need to hire, and maybe we need to go with someone other than Cosmont. Apparently, we need a consultant to work with us. We need an investment banker. We need bond counsel, at least those three parties. And we may not have any of those parties identified at this point. And the time required to do that might determine whether we do it ahead of we do it quickly, or it's something we do in the fall, mid to late fall.
Yeah, you know.
To tie into the sorry, go ahead.
No, please,
Johnson.
you first.
To tie into your observation, Commissioner Johnson, the discussion was had at the City Council meeting in very specific terms of what they were obligating themselves to by approving that consent calendar item, and the discussion that, yes, it wouldn't necessarily tie us to Cosmont, but that there could be an RFP created for other firms to perform that work for us. So it's a well-founded observation, and that discussion did take place surrounding that consideration.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I look potentially to Commissioner Woodham's background as a chief investment officer. I mean, let me tell you, I'm borrowing $100 million to build a building somewhere, and I'm comfortable doing that. This, I feel that some of us are out of our league on when we're talking about, and I do apologize, I wasn't able to hear most of that presentation. It sounds like we're potentially encumbering city assets as security for this.
We're mortgaging a street.
We're mortgaging the streets. I was afraid to say it, right? Yeah. All right. So yes.
As long as it's not Avenue A, I'm okay with that.
and I kind of laugh. Let them come and take back our streets. When we can't pay this. But
perhaps they could have the street that has all the construction problems that we're talking about from time to time here. It's not completed.
Only the ones with potholes.
But so they are hearing it if that didn't come across clearly, that item on Tuesday night. And I agree with Commissioner Johnson, and think it'd be important to, I'd really like to have everybody weigh in to a certain extent. I think that would be great to each of our experiences with the presentation, if necessary, to our individual council people. I think the more information that they get, the better. The more people that they look at and consideration of other cities and what's been going on with Manhattan Beach, for example, or other cities across California, more information, the better, to be certain. The more options, the better, to be certain.
Yeah,
I agree.
I very much agree with both Commissioners Woodham and Johnson. My take on the presentation, my enthusiasm was around the concept and the fact that I thought it needed to be further investigated, and it may be a viable path for the city in terms of the contracting and those things. The explanation I got, or I believe that I heard, a couple of things. First of all, if we want to avoid the lump sum payment at the beginning of the year, we need to do this very quickly. However, we could elect to pay the monthly payments to Calpers and continue to do that until we make this happen. So it's not an all or nothing that it has to be completed by June 30th. I think that's what I heard. The other thing that I heard was Cosmont has done a lot of work in the area and for our city, and realizing that our city has a policy that says professional services don't need to go out to bid. I have no idea where the city council will go with this, but I do agree, particularly with Commissioners Woodham and Johnson. I think there needs to be a little bit better due diligence in this before a contract is awarded to move forward.
You know, we all see a lot of presentations and sales pitches, and I don't want to keep. I will say some place I know of. I hate to keep pointing back to experiences. Some place I know of says that any time and the next time a vendor comes in and says the sky's falling if you don't do what I say immediately, and this may be the case here, but we flat out don't talk to them.
Well, no, but I think that was my point. They said.
Oh, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah.
The city's decision is, if they're planning on moving forward with this, if they can't make it by June 30th, then don't pay the lump sum, just pay the monthly payments to Calpers until we can get it organized. So I think that's what I heard in their presentation. And like I said, the concept sounds very attractive, but yes, I think we should listen to more than just one vendor.
Agreed. Thank you, everyone.
Marnie, a question to you. We can pay this monthly, correct? The Calpers, the payment for a UAL?
We can, we lose the prepayment.
Yeah, I know.
And
So we'd have to analyze whether it's worth that to do it, but that's certainly.
yeah, and I'll have to pay attention in the upcoming presentation to council. But my understanding was it was trying to beat the invoicing, which, you know, you opt to either pay it all up front or pay it monthly. But once that invoice had gone out, you were responsible for that. But I'll pay closer attention on Tuesday and see if that's correct.
Yeah, again, I think from my standpoint, the comments we made tonight about being cautious with the selection of the vendors is all well and good, and we want to do that. The overriding issue and the thing that is important now is to keep the process going, because we're talking about real dollars for the city over a period of the next 20 years. Some range of 50 to $89 million in savings. So that's worth doing a lot of due diligence to see if we can realize that.
And if nothing else, we made it known to council that we strongly felt that it's something that they should look into and learn more about. So we accomplished that goal. So I feel good about that.
So the first thing I would do in a project like this is to put together some sort of a straw man timeline of what has to happen. And Commissioner Woodham points out some things like hiring counsel and hiring an investment banker. Is that part of our role to request that from us or someone, or are we looking for someone else to, I don't know what the calendar is for putting together a bond offering like this, but I'm sure you understand what I'm referring to. I mean, we really need to see that, and because we're not going to be together again for 30 days.
Some of that was addressed in limited fashion in the presentation, where they talked about the difference between the pension obligation bonds and the lease revenue bonds, and proceedings such as getting approval through a court system or with the pension obligation bonds versus not having to do that with lease revenue. They didn't dive too deeply into the processes, and I think it's a point well taken to say, so when you start here, what is your fluidity? The way I took it, my impression was that Cosmont was talking about it being a 4 to 6 month process on an expedited basis, but not listing the mile markers along the way in order to accomplish something like that. And certainly $200 million bond offering in 4 to 6 months does seem to be an ambitious endeavor.
I could see a 4-month process to do an RFP and decide who your vendor is. So So I agree if everybody is saying, you know, urgency is a priority.
John Wooden would say, be quick, but don't hurry.
Thank you.
All right.
Marty,
gentlemen.
quick question on the RFP process. How many vendors do we usually go for when we issue an RFP? Or how do we determine how many vendors we want to interview? How does that process work? I mean, on a macro version.
It varies completely. You know, you may just, you know, kind of put it out in the universe, and whoever would like to respond can do so. Sometimes, you know, a list is put together. We're going to send the RFP to these individuals or firms. So it can go anywhere.
The city code actually has a clause that says specifically, and if the city decides that this is a professional services contract, the city actually says that there is no reason to put it out to bid, that by virtue of the fact it's professional services, there doesn't need to be a bid. So it's really very much up to the city council, the city manager, and the powers that be to make those decisions.
And then if it did go out to bid, would it be up to council to decide to maybe delegate it to us to hear from a couple different firms and make a recommendation to them, or would the firms just all present directly to council or to staff? How does that work? I'm sorry.
There's no set procedure. I know, for example, with audit firms, Commissioner Johnson correlated one of his comments to that. Staff will narrow the list of respondents down to those that best meet our needs. And then in that process, the audit committee, which is a subcommittee of the council together with the city clerk and city treasurer, then they will interview and then make a recommendation to council. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's just one of the options.
All right, thank you. Any more discussion on this item? All right. Was there any public comment on this item?
No public.
No
All right.
comments.
No e-comments. Okay. Then we will, then can I get is there a motion to receive our final item, J4?
So moved.
Second.
All right. And then we will do a roll call vote, beginning with Commissioner Johnson, please.
Aye.
Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon.
Aye, and I'm enjoying the alphabetical roll call.
I might be a little OCD, okay? You have to bear with me. And
You're the decider.
Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
All right, and the chair votes aye as well. Item J4 is now received and filed. All right. Then we will move on to item K. Member items and referrals for staff. And on this, we will begin with Commissioner Woodham.
I have none, thanks.
All right, Commissioner Solomon.
No, thank you.
Commissioner Wynn.
None, thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Just like to express my appreciation to staff for working with me over the past month and especially this past week and a half to get my reconnection to this meeting and to make sure it works. So here I am. As you can see, my blood pressure is a little bit lower, being able to see everybody and see your smiling faces after 3 months of fading in and out. So Going to a new, completely different computer, we hope that's in the past, and I thank staff for their assistance in that.
And I want to say to you, Commissioner Johnson, welcome back. You were
Thank you.
definitely missed. Good to have you here. All right. Commissioner Samples
I have nothing. Thank you.
and Commissioner Marin.
Nothing.
All right. I have nothing else to add at this time. So I want to thank staff for their work. And can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Seeing a motion in a second, we'll do our last roll call vote of the night. Let's begin with Commissioner Solomon,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham,
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Thank you, Marnie, Eleanor, Doug, Cammie, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.